For the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, August 3rd. We are complying with the governor's mandate for masks. So for everyone at the council's tables, please eat your microphone so that we can record it audibly. And then if you are speaking at the podium, feel free to remove your mask while you're speaking, per the order as well. We have two public hearings to get underway. First, we will open the public hearing for alley vacation, alleys that are bounded by East Street, McKee Street, Michigan Avenue, and Railroad Street. Ron, you are up with the first diagram of this. Council, you should have received a copy of this in your packet as well.
You see highlighted in red, there was a petition from the Archdiocese of the Catholic Church and all of the adjoining property owners around those alleys. And under consideration is the east-west alley north of McKee Street. Part of that has previously actually been vacated, but there was an issue about that ordinance, so we felt just do it again and make it clean. You'll notice the church, the sanctuary building, is in that alley already. The next one is north-south alley that runs up to Railroad Street. That goes through the back of the rectory. And then the third one is the alley going to the south down to McKee Street, and that goes through an existing carport. None of these alleys have been used. So without further ado, public speak.
Okay, is anyone here to speak on this alley vacation in particular? Oh, okay. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Andy Sholey. I'm here on behalf of the Archdiocese. If there's any other questions about it, I've got diagrams where we've laid it out. The carport that Ron mentioned, it's not a traditional carport. It's actually got 4x4 posts driven into the ground. It's not just like a metal frame carport. It's got 4x4 posts with a asphalt roof over the top of it. And they just drive in off of McKee Street and drive through the two buildings and go back out to 421. So it's more of a permanent carport, I guess, being at the poster in the ground.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Please come forward, state your name for the record. Please feel free to remove your mask.
Mayor Spadaitis, I'm here on behalf of my mom. She lives across the street from the Catholic Church on East Street. I just wonder what the reason is to close the alley.
Okay,
That's all. Just the reason to close it.
and you want to speak on, yeah.
Okay. I did the research. The first 160 feet that goes through the old Catholic Church, that was actually vacated in 1883. I went over some of this stuff with Chris Stevens. We thought we would just like some clarification because back in 1883, it was just the council's meeting. There's no ordinances back then that officially closed it. So that one wasn't too bad. The one going north and south through the rectory, I found several deeds when the church acquired the property in 1897. It said that alley was already vacated in 1897. But I cannot find any meeting minutes, from the city council back before 1897 that gave me a clear-cut answer. So we were just trying to clean up those two areas, and then the one going that continues from, it went through the rectory, that continues on east out to 421, that one, there is no record. That is still an open alley, but it dead ends into the alley that was vacated in 1883 by the church. The point of this, they wanted to get all that cleaned up so that they could do a survey and divide off the rectory from the old church and the old school.
Okay.
That was the point of this request.
Okay. The parsonage is in the process of being sold, correct?
Yes.
Okay, what's gonna happen to the church and the school?
As
Do we
far,
know?
all I know, as far as I know, they're just looking for another buyer. But I'm not involved in any of those negotiations. I mean, they told me where they wanted the new proposed property lines around the rectory because they have a buyer for that.
Right.
But that's, I don't
So
know
it's
what-
just a cleanup, to make it official. The
Yes.
alleys are effectively closed anyway.
Pretty much, like I said, I've got the meeting minutes from 1883, but it only went to the first 160 feet. That city council meeting stopped at the alley that went north and south through the rectory. And then, well, like I said, I've just got deeds that said it was closed, but I couldn't find it in the minutes.
Yeah,
Well,
I think,
and if I may, Chris Stephen, for the record, I do, so to inform the council, it was my recommendation to Andy when he asked me, how do we clean this up? And we have this situation where we have some minutes that go to certain parts and some minutes that don't. And I said the easiest thing to do is if we just take all of the alleys that are there, that are basically already closed anyway, we do one official hearing to get those vacated pursuant to the statute. Much of the statute which didn't actually exist in the 1800s anyway. So I think what we're really doing is just trying to make a clean record so that the archdiocese can move forward with their sale of the property
okay.
in a clean manner, and that the city can make sure that all of our ducks are in a row.
Okay, all right, that's okay, that explains it. That's really all my concern was. We know the reason, and it's because of the sale of the park, mainly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, we appreciate it. Any other further comments from the public? Yes, ma'am, please come forward, state your name for the record.
Nora Gunter. When the talk is that they're gonna be closed, will they be physically closed with a barrier? And if you do drive through them, if they're not with a closed barrier, I mean, is there like a fine or? I know they want it on the record that they're closed, but does that actually mean like a gate will be put up or?
No, ma'am. So basically, any city street or alley in the community, in the town, that is platted and recorded is recorded as such, as an alley. So there's a statutory process called to vacate that particular alley. It'll still exist. Now, what will happen is it will revert in ownership back to the two adjacent landowners. So so basically each of them will own half an alley that they can do with what they want. So a perfect example of this would be here on the square, the bank building that's on one side and the building that has the pottery place on the other. That alley was vacated. It's no longer an active alley. They each have half an alley that they can kind of do with what they choose. And that's one of the places where they hold the Farm to Fresh event every year because it's an alley that people can't drive down. It's got stuff in front of it. That would be up to the property owners themselves as to what they wanted to put in terms of a barrier or anything like that.
Okay.
Basically, once it stops being part of the city after the vacation, it reverts to the landowners.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to comment on this alley vacation? Ron, anything further from this one? Okay, council, any questions, or, of course, we'll have this later. Okay, we will close the public hearing for the alley vacation that we've just identified. And we will open the public hearing for a street vacation of 6th Street, located west of Anderson Street, ending at its eastern terminus.
Outlined in green here is the right-of-way platted for 6th Street. It commences on the west end at Anderson Street and ends at the railroad, the abandoned railroad property on the east end. We have received a petition from the adjoining property owners. They are both in agreement. The street has never been opened. It's actually fenced at the moment. Equipment has been stored on that right-of-way over the years. So the request is simply to remove that from city ownership, I guess, and transfer, as Chris explained, to the adjoining property
there anyone from the public here to comment on this street vacation? Yes, sir. Come on forward. Please state your name.
Yeah, I'm Stuart Reed with Cobra Fertilizer. Kind of like what Ron had said, it basically ends at the old railroad tracks, and actually there's a ditch back there, and as you can see, I think it runs back to KB Foods. So there's really no way it could ever continue through without, major modifications. Cova and Tommy's Diesel Shop is the other adjacent landowner. We just looked to close it up, clean it up, and like Ron said, we have stored things there, so we'll just take ownership of it if no one objects.
Okay. Anybody else from the audience here to speak on this street vacation? Okay. If not, we'll close this public hearing on street vacation. Thank you, Ron. Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, the time being a little after 7 p.m. The meeting of the Greensburg City Council is called to order at this time. To comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the city requests that participants in this meeting complete a voluntary anonymous survey that's available on the table in the back of the room. Brenda, will you please call the roll?
Jamie King.
Here.
Daryl Poland.
Here.
Diana McKenzie. Here. Kevin Fleetwood.
Here.
Rick Emsweller.
Here.
Okay. You all should have received a copy of the minutes for July 6th, the executive session for July 13th, and the special session for July 20th. Were there any amendments or corrections to those? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
I abstain.
Jamie abstains, okay. New business, from Ron, we have the vacation of the alley that we just talked about, ordinance 2020-8. Council, I think we're pretty familiar with that. Any questions or comments?
Move to approve.
First reading.
First reading. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Ordinance 2020. Yes.
I make the motion to suspend the rules and do a second reading on ordinance 2020-8.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Darrell. Brenda, you got all that?
No, what was,
We're gonna suspend the rules on 2020-8 by Kevin's motion, seconded by Darrell.
got it?
Okay.
Vote on the motion to suspend.
All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
I'll make a motion we pass 2020-8 on the second reading.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Brenda, do you have copies?
I do, right with me, ready to be signed.
Okay, we'll sign those at the end. Now we're moving to 2020-9, vacation for 6th Street. Any further comments or questions?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve has been made by Diana. Is there a second?
Second.
Rick.
Give it to Rick. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Okay.
Once again, I make a motion to suspend the rules on 2020-9 for the second reading.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. All those in favor of suspending the rules signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Is there a motion to approve 2020-9 on second reading? Moved by Vieta. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rick again. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, we now have ordinance 2020-10, which is a revision of the intersection control for 4th Street and Ireland.
That intersection, as I'm sure most of us are aware, was an all-way stop intersection a while back, probably about a year ago, with the construction of the new water treatment plant. Ireland Street north of 4th Street was vacated. Now is a driveway, if you will, into the water treatment plant, so it's now a 3-approach intersection with a driveway in it. The traffic committee considered changing the intersection control such that northbound Ireland Street would stop at 4th Street, and 4th Street would be a through street through that intersection. The traffic committee did recommend to you that the change be effective upon the substantial completion of the water plant construction, at which time the extra construction, parking, and vehicles would be out of the way. So the ordinance is written in terms of that will likely be sometime early next year that they are to be substantially complete.
Any further questions or comments on that? If not, we take a motion to approve 2020-10.
So moved.
Second?
First reading.
First reading.
Second.
Second by Kevin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Do we want to suspend that one too?
I don't believe,
No need to.
can't do it, I don't think.
I don't think he's going to suspend that one.
Oh.
Change in the intersection.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that.
Potential penalty.
2020-11, provision for intersection control of Davidson and Warren.
Again, Davidson and Warren Street is an all-way stop control. There are 3 approaches to the intersection. The traffic committee considered that intersection and recommends to you that Davidson be made a through street at that location, and Warren stop eastbound or northeastbound Warren Street would stop.
Any questions on that one? Okay, is there a
To approve ordinance 2020-11.
motion made by,
First reading.
go ahead on first reading?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Resolution 2020-15 for transfer of funds.
Yes, we are requesting, a little brief history. We have a 10 to 12-year-old engineering science plotter in the office that needs some maintenance. Maintenance on it is relatively expensive, and in looking at that, we discovered that we could buy a new one for not much more than we thought maintenance would require. The Board of Works has approved the purchase, however, that we do have the money in the budget, but it's in a 300 series account, so we're asking that $6,500 be moved to a 400 series account.
Any questions for Ron on that? This was brought up at the Board of Works meeting this evening and discussed about which one to purchase.
I'll motion to pass. Go ahead.
Go ahead and move the monies.
Okay, is there a second? Darrell, second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Bryan Robbins, Director of the Greensburg Decatur County Economic Development Corp. Let's talk about tax abatements for property development on Veterans Way.
Thank you very much. I believe the council all got a copy of the SB1 that was submitted to the abatement committee on behalf of the taxpayer of Pizza Craft. And the abatement committee reviewed it last week, and through discussion and evaluation, we also have, I should say, the owner and developer here too, if anybody has any questions. But on the recommendation of the abatement committee, they are suggesting a 7-year tax abatement for this development out on Veterans Way. And I will actually step aside and let the owner here come and talk a little bit about what's coming.
Jeff Whitaker, and we had looking at a brick oven pizza restaurant, and we requested a 10-year abatement for it. It's on Veterans, on the address given, I think was, I can't remember what it was, but it's at the east end of the lake or the detention basin that's already in place there. And that was, the we did put together, I think we kind of went off of some of the previous stuff that we've done with the other restaurants, although there's, hopefully, a better outcome with that in the current environment, with that type of a restaurant versus the last one we done there, which is, taking a hit with the whole COVID ordeal, pretty much. And so I know they suggested a 7-year with contingencies, the contingency or the with the having it complete by July 31.
July 31.
21. We'll work diligently to complete it, but I don't think that that's within the possibility for me to guarantee that that's going to be done and start and then have whatever abatements, if any, are permitted, to have that revoked after we start that. So I guess my request is still to consider for the amount of investment being made, that it would be the 10-year and without restriction of things that I can control. I don't know if government's going to come back and tell us we can't go to work again. Who knows? Shut down for a month, week, 2 months.
But I don't think that restriction said you couldn't come back and then we could figure something out if there's an issue. The concern though is if there's an abatement out there and nothing's happened and then all of a sudden 3 years later, we've got a building being built for an abatement. That was a concern, right? So we're just trying to have a better control. So if it's not gonna be done by then, maybe it's better to wait on the.
What would be lost if that's the case? I mean,
well, they're just.
If I don't receive it.
We've had a lot of issues with abatements, and we've had to go back and clean up abatements because there's been issues of when they start, when they were applied for. So this is just trying to help clean that up. It wasn't trying to penalize you, I don't think, in any way. Was that suggestion?
So if you start, but yet you don't meet that deadline, that's not, then I guess what's the.
I think that's where we come back, and I don't think we're gonna sit here and try to take something away from you, but I mean, if you've got legitimate reasons, I think that's something we consider. I can't speak for everybody, but I would say that, you know, I mean, we want you to invest.
We did this earlier this year, right, on a form of non-compliance.
Yeah, it's a form of non-compliance, and what it is, and it was, I think we passed it a couple of meetings ago. It was a means of just kind of keeping track, keeping in communication with the developer. I don't think there's any clause in this that would result in any vacancy or anything. It's just a means of, and any, I can speak on behalf of the committee, and Mr. Wigger's always been one that if there is a delay, you always come in with a letter and explain why it is. And especially in today's environment, I think you're right, there's a lot of unknowns.
Too many for me to say.
Yeah, exactly, but.
I just can't, I mean, it's.
The other thing it's actually good for the developer because then it delays the start of the abatement until 100% completion, whereas if you're in partial completion, your building would be assessed at 50%, and then that would signal the start of the abatement, and the abatement would be actually your first year, which presuming you get 100%, you wind up being 100% more than 50% of your assessed value. So actually, it helps the developer as well. So. We with the committee, that's what we were thinking, and again, it's just more of a means of keeping in contact with the developer and working with you, and not meant to be punitive by any shape.
Council, any other questions or comments for Mr. Whitaker or Bryan?
I mean, from my standpoint, I personally got a problem with July 31st, 2021. In this environment you're working in, there's no guarantee you can get materials, there's no guarantee that you're going to have people to do work, there's no guarantee that you're not going to get shut down. So,
The concern though is,
I don't understand, this is the first time I remember reading something like this on an abatement.
No, so part of the concern though is if, let's say it's July 1st next year, we haven't even started construction on it.
So
At that point in time, what this is gonna do is, we're gonna end up saying, all right, you need to come back and reapply for the abatement when you're ready to start the project versus, there's no, it's not saying he's halfway done with it and we're gonna try to, take the abatement away because it wasn't done by a set date. I think there's no intent of that in any way, shape, or form. This was one of those where it's just, if it's gonna be 3 years before we start the project, then we need to delay the abatement, come back in 3 years
Well,
when we're ready
nobody's
to
gonna
start the
come in and ask
project.
for an abatement 3 years before they start you.
We've got several of those projects that are out there, and they've created some issues for us. So we have had that.
Their intent was not to wait 3 years.
No, the intent, so what we're saying, just to try to help clean that up, is if it's gonna end up being delayed, then come back and reapply for the abatement when you're ready to start the project, or when we think that's gonna start, that's all.
And the other is particularly in the TIF district too, as that TIF district kind of starts to wind down, if you have an abatement out in that area that continues to be delayed, it kind of affects the estimate of what the TIF's going to be bringing in. They give an abatement, approve an abatement, containing abatement for something, obviously it's going to go on beyond the life of the TIF, and you want to know as far as planning out what the income for the TIF is going to be. If that continues to get delayed, it's going to, could have an effect on the county and the TIF side. And that's not everywhere, that's just.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
I think I tend to agree with Kevin on the environment right now is, it's really kind of a bad time to start implementing something like this.
It's not good.
I think it's a great idea, but he brought up something about even they're able to get materials. I mean, I know in the business I work in, it's hard to get materials right now. It's hard to get anything right now. And I think maybe just with this environment, maybe we need to reconsider that.
And actually, for the record, it doesn't matter from a taxing standpoint, I was talking to Green, it doesn't matter if it finishes in July or December of 2021, it's still going to be
It
assessed.
doesn't matter the way it's put in writing.
So if we wanted to add another 6 months on there, it's not going to affect as far as the tax.
So that makes me question, if it doesn't matter, why is it in writing? If it doesn't matter, just take it out.
Well, no, it will matter as far as if it goes past 2021.
He's saying, if you change the date from July to December 31st.
Yeah, of that same year. And again, you guys are both exactly right. This is the first time. It was, it's something that the committee has been trying to. I don't want to speak on behalf of the committee necessarily, but I can say that trying to clean things up and make it a little bit more streamlined and that pertaining to a lot of the procedure and process of abatement.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
No.
I just, we're all wearing masks, last week we weren't, and who knows what's gonna happen next month, we may be back to Zoom, there's just a lot of unknowns there, and I think it's something that needs to be implemented into the process, but I just feel the timing is wrong right now.
I agree. New construction, I know you can't get material right now.
There's
tough.
certain things that are really difficult,
It's
some are
tough.
just not available, period. And, there's so many, I don't know, I mean, everybody knows what the deal is. There's so many supply chains been broke, it's ridiculous that things that you took for granted was just go down the street and get them. You can't, and, so, and to speculate what the hell's gonna go on between now and then, if that's, honestly, I mean, if, I would just not really consider even pushing forward. There's too much at stake for me to put things in place that I don't have no control over. That's, I don't want, we want to move forward, but I've got to be able to do it and be comfortable that, I hear what everybody's saying. I don't know what year it is or what election year is for council people or anything else, but when something's in black and white, the same people ain't sitting across that desk when that next time comes around, who knows? I certainly don't. So,
Would December 31st make it more palatable? I mean, nobody here is up for election. next year, so you
I
don't have to worry about that.
understand, Mayor, what you're saying, and it's not the exact date. I mean, you know, the only thing I can tell you is I go out there and you can call any neighbor out there, and I'm riding a dozer or a lift or something, way past when I should be, and they probably won't be, shut it off and go on, you know, but, that's the best we can do.
And maybe instead of a date, just, I'm thinking out loud, so I'm, like if we ask for, like when we do our, was it May 1st, we do the CF1 renewals, or May 15th, right? So it's not exactly a renewal if he hasn't started the process yet, but at least an update, maybe we put it in the contract, the letter, that there's, you know, you give up some
Give an update.
notification of an update, right, or something like that. And you've got to do that at least on an annual basis till the project starts.
Well, and from the starting part, just so then we shared this, I mean, our intentions are to start within 30 days, so we can have it framed before winter, so, you know, it may all be a moot point, I don't know, just depends on what we can get, but at the end of the day, it's, given an update, I don't know, I don't care, I mean, that's fine.
I think that's just part of, some of these they end up getting lost, and then it's like 3 years later, then you're like, oh, well.
And again, I think on committee, I mean, this is not geared towards Mr. Whitaker, because actually during he does give the updates each time during the CF1. So this is something that the committee has talked about based on what Jamie just said. You know, again, these are other businesses and such that have lax in some of the reporting and that and the projects. And we're just trying to find the right means to clean it up. It's not a reflection of Mr. Whitaker or development.
We're not trying to penalize you in any way. We want to encourage you to do what you're doing.
I get it, but I just, from my side, I just don't want to make a commitment I can't keep. And I don't want to have to redo it. You know, so, anyways, that's.
Anything else? Want to make a motion either way? Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. I guess I can make the motion based on the tax abatement's recommendation for 7 years. We can take the July 31st date comment out of the agreement letter, but then I would ask that we just add in the agreement letter, a section, you know, on the same time the CF1s are due on May 15th, that we get an update annually, at least till the abatement starts, and then after that, the CF1 renewals will cover those updates. That sounds right.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There you go. Annual CF1 annual abatement reports.
And that was they could send that out to everybody too. It's just the annual reporting for the abatements that are out already and in progress. If anybody had any questions on them or anything like that, I'd be glad to take a stab at it. Otherwise, the committee approved all the CF1s and the continuation of the abatements as submitted.
Any questions on those? You need a motion to approve those or accept them?
Nope.
For information? Okay. Any final questions? Okay, thanks much.
Thanks.
Mark Klosterkemper, additional appropriations for First Street, 2020-5, second reading, I believe.
Is it second reading?
Is that right, Brenda?
I think we had to go back to first reading.
No, it is first reading because it had not been advertised before the last meeting. So it is a first reading.
So we're back to first reading. This is for the First Street unexpected project expenses we had. Yeah, second time doing the first reading.
The last time it was considered as approval for Mark to request.
I'll make a motion, we pass ordinance 2020-5, first reading.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
Can't suspend it on one.
This one has to come back next month.
Can I do this one?
Can we,
Or not even?
can we pass it? Can we put it on the agenda for Thursday, or that's not?
It's an appropriation bill.
Do we have to re-advertise it?
No,
No. Do you-
when advertising, but it takes 2 readings to do it, and I don't believe you can suspend.
That's what I was asking, if we can put it on our budget meeting, or can we talk about it during that? Can we approve it during that, or doesn't have to be?
That budget.
Do you get that quickly, Mark, or in September wait?
September complete. Right now, we're struggling to get contractors all together at the same time to get it completed in-house. Seems to be holding up well with what we've done to maintain what we've got in place.
Maybe, is that okay with you, or do you want to do it?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I was just trying to figure out how we can get it
There's
done.
one little spot in one of those corners at the very end that we're getting out of straight out.
Okay.
We estimated in-house, so we're just going to let it flow. All in all, it's doing pretty well.
Okay, we will add that to our September meeting. 2020-6, or 2020-6, the amended garbage and trash for the city. You'll receive a copy of that. Mark's talked with you about it before, we talked about it. We have sort of a drawn-out version of what that looks like. Mark, do you have anything else that you want to point out?
I don't believe we discussed it the first meeting. We didn't have a price for households that had a multiple container. So I went back and looked at the cost of what that is. In other words, I took out the cost of the vehicle being there. I took out the labor cost, just kept the landfill cost and a proportional share of the repairs, because it does require the vehicle to cycle. And it came up to, I think, $4.94, so we rounded it to $5. I didn't feel like charging a full rate for the second one was appropriate. So that's reflected in there accordingly. Other than that, it's pretty much exactly what we talked about last month. Just wording was changed to make it acceptable for it to be used for operating expenses, and the rest of it remained intact.
A while back when you did the study about the thing involved with the landfill expansion, and what it would cost if we didn't, how much more it would cost if we didn't have the landfill to for trash.
Mm-hmm.
And then these communities that you did the comparison on, that we got in the last meeting,
Correct.
how many of those communities have landfills that as close as we do? I'm just trying to wrap my head around, we want to increase our tipping fees to what, some of what these communities are.
Oh, I've
They've got
looked.
excessive expense for transporting trash to a landfill compared to us. Do we need to go that much?
I didn't look at what the impact would be if we went. I looked at our current cost. In other words, everything was based on our cost, not on anticipated additional costs. It wasn't based off a comparison with the other communities. If you notice, the other communities averaged about $17. So I didn't use that for determining the value. What we've done is we've done a complete cost analysis on what we're currently paying and what costs we're incurring. I didn't think it was appropriate to look at somebody else's because I don't know how their operating expenses work. I don't know their landfill situation. I just dealt with our actual cost that we have.
Any other questions or comments?
That would start January 2022. So the $12 was just a break even basically, right? And then we put a 3% increase annually, but that wouldn't start till January 2022.
Correct. Right now, we're usually getting about every 12 to 14 months, we're getting a 5% increase from the landfill. But that's just a portion of the cost that we're calculating. So the 3% should be sufficient to cover their 5% increase. They raised them in September of 17, they raised it again in May of 18, and they raised it again in August of 19. And I wouldn't be surprised if we won't see us increase again this year before the end of the year.
I'm sorry, what were those dates again?
Pardon?
What were those dates again?
I've got most of them. It went up from $13.75 to $15. I'll go back beyond that, Kevin. To March of 15th, it jumped from $13.75 to $15. In May of 16, it went to $15.50. In August of 17, it went to $16. In May of 18, it went to $17. And in August of 19, it went to $17.85. Some of the increases have been 6%. Some of them have been 7. Last one was 5. The one where they jumped $13.75 to 15. Gosh, I get it. Well, 50. Went up about 9%.
Per cubic yard, is that what they're?
Correct. Per cubic yard of compacted material.
Just a question, it's probably not relevant to what we're looking at exactly, but is the landfill regulated by any kind of state mandate?
They're not like.
So, is it any time they can raise their rates and there's no competition and?
Sure, there's competition.
Yeah.
We have a choice. Right now, if we want, we can transport to Morristown or we can transport to Jackson County.
Competition's not all that fine. That's my point. Like I
Right.
said, it's irrelevant to what we're talking
Right.
about, but I'm just.
Yeah, they're not regulated.
We're pretty much at their mercy. It bothers me that we have to take this rate from $3.50, I think is what it is, to $12, just like that. And, but, I see the black and white, I see that, our hands are pretty much tied on this, but it is a tough situation for those on fixed incomes, just to see this quadruple, almost.
We also haven't raised it 16 years. That's part of the problem.
Shame on us. Shame on us for not keeping up with that.
And that's why the way the ordinance is written, so we don't find ourselves in this situation where we're losing money
I saw
again.
that. I appreciate
That's why we tried to keep
Yeah.
it as low as possible, just to cover the landfill fees and put the 3% increase in. Because it's always unpopular when you do it.
Sure.
And if you let it go for years and years and years, then you find yourselves in a situation where
there's a chance that you might not have to do 4%, is that?
Well, and you incur more labor costs. Labor goes up, where everything would be.
In other words,
Cost of
We put something in there to try to cover the landfill costs, which have been coming on an annual basis. In other words, they have a 5% increase, they have a 6% increase, they have a 9% increase, and they come at you almost annually. I will admit, the first couple of years, they didn't. Too bad. And then if you'll look at this chart I have, I don't know if anybody still has a spreadsheet, but you look at our total fees, we pay them 95, 100, 15, 111, and 16. The 3 years prior to me, we were paying 135,000. Then we changed our strategy as far as how we empty trucks and when we went to the landfill, and we cut our landfill expense about $30,000 immediately. And they hadn't raised the fees. But since we have reduced our volume, they continually raise our fees. I mean, we can't get around it. They want the money. And they need the money for operating expenses.
Any other questions, comments? First reading, like a motion to approve the ordinance 2020-6.
Do you want to ask anyone from the public to speak?
Is anyone from the public here to speak on it? Yeah.
I move to approve the first reading.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second. No, Rick, you can have that one. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Thanks, sir.
Sorry, just checking. You'll take care of the last thing. It's on yours.
Okay, Brenda, you're up to discuss amendment 2020-7.
Good evening. I would like to discuss on 2020-7. It is an ordinance to amend the definition establishing the remedies for the public nuisance and unkept properties. In reviewing our records and our ordinances, Sarah Hamer and I found that there are 3 words that make a large difference in this ordinance. That was in your packet. It's stating that the city clerk treasurer's office would have the authority to file a lien on property not paying for their upkeep or mowing that the city would have to entail. So we would like to change that wording just to be in line with what's happening and have that state that the building commissioner would be responsible for doing that. And that's all, just the 3, instead of the clerk's office, it would say the building commission office.
Any questions for Brenda on this?
Or Sarah.
Or Sarah? If not, we'll take a motion to approve 2020-7 on first reading. Moved by Vieta, second. Second by Darrell. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? It does include fine, right? It levies a fine.
Yes, and that's what, if they didn't pay the fine within 30 days, then she has a right to file a lien on their property.
Move that one back next month as well. Resolution 2020-14 to amend capital asset clarification.
As you know that at this time we're being audited by the State Board of Accounts, which is an annual auditing, and they were concerned about the amounts of our asset classifications, and they suggested moving that larger because if if the assets are not recorded and, submitted to the State Board of Accounts this year, there will be, consequences for that. They had requested that be done, by the prior administration, and it was not completed, it was begun. So on B, under section 2, you will find that number, the infrastructure, the total would be an asset of 20,000 or greater would be listed as an asset on paperwork submitted to the State Board of Accounts. On vehicles, it would be a vehicle of $10,000 or greater value. And then the machinery, equipment, furniture, and other tangible personal property would be at $5,000.
Those numbers came recommended from the State Board of Accounts.
Yes, they
correct?
did.
Any questions for Brenda on 2020-14?
I'll make a motion to approve 2020-14 on the first reading.
Second?
Second.
Kevin, discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Okay, up next, 2020-12.
The State Board of Accounts, and these, I'm coming before you with most of